Okay, good morning, everyone. As you can see, attached is a copy of the agenda. You should be able to see the agenda. We have a full agenda for this meeting. So I am going to let Dr. Chioma get started. She's our first presenter. Chioma, I'm giving you presenter's rights. We can't hear you. Chioma, do you want me to go to the next presentation? I'm sorry, we can't hear you. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next presentation, Chioma. If you want to type in the chat, that's fine. Ali, I see you're here. Mary, let me make sure Mary is here.
Okay, I'm actually okay now. I couldn't unmute myself.
I think she may be
But
having some technical difficulties. I
Are you able to hear me
apologize.
now? Are you able to hear me now? Are you able to hear me now?
Ali, I'm going to go ahead and make you the next presenter, okay? Ali, you have presenter's rights. Ali, we can't hear you.
Love you. No, sorry, it's my she's older than you. Okay, it's calling you. Maybe it's calling junior sister. Younger sister. Okay. So, but did Connie know you? Did she tell the sisters?
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? This is Ali Hassan.
Good morning, Ali. We can hear you.
Okay, great. See, it's Mary up here. She has the beginning, but if not, I can go ahead and get started. Shasta, are you cueing the presentation?
Ali, can you hear me? This is Jared. How are you?
Pretty good in yourself, sir. I can hear you.
Okay.
I did see the. Okay.
Yeah, Shasta's unable to hear you. So we're obviously having some technical issues. Are you? I think you have co-host ability. Are you able to pull your presentation up?
Sure. Let me see if this will work.
Okay.
Indulge me for 1 second.
Okay.
Can people see my screen?
Ali, it's Jared again. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, I'm able to see
Okay.
your screen now. If others
Okay.
could say, oh, it looks like at least a couple of people are saying yes.
Okay.
So Ali, you should be good to go on your end.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, cool. All right, so I'll begin. I'll cover the first beginning. Mary was going to cover this, but we'll kick it right off here. So, welcome everyone. I'm Ali Hassan, management analyst with the Department of Healthcare Finance. The first slide, we wanted to introduce the fact that the district currently has 3 HCBS waivers. The first, as we all know, the Intellectual Disability Development of Disabilities Home and Community-Based Service Waiver, which has an effective date of October 1st, 2022. The next waiver would be the IFS waiver, the Individual Family Supports waiver. That waiver was amended November 1st, 2020, with an effective date of October 1st, 2022. And finally, the waiver that we operate here at Department of Healthcare Finance would be the Elderly and Persons with Physical Disabilities Waiver, EPD waiver, and it has an effective date of February 1st, 2022. All waivers are have a continuation year for 5 years, and then at the end of the third year, we typically have a part where we can have it amended. Let's see, go to the next slide. Please excuse me because I'm dealing with a PDF opposed to the actual presentation. Okay, so understanding the relationship roles and responsibilities for the waivers. Here at Healthcare Finance, we have the oversight function as the oversight agency, and we then delegate the role of operational functions to the Department of Disability Services. So for that delegation includes the fact that we have several waiver assurances, as it relates to level of care, participant centered planning and service delivery, qualified provider, and health and welfare. And through these different assurances, what we do is through the monitoring and oversight here at Healthcare Finance, in addition to the oversight that's or the functions that are conducted at Department of Disability Services, we then provide quarterly status reports to the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Finally, noting that DHCF is a single state Medicaid agency, and we have oversight responsibility of both the IDD and IFS waivers, as well as the administrative authority and financial accountability. So here's a breakdown of the performance measures under each waiver assurance. We have 2 for level of care, 6 for participant-centered planning and service delivery, and 6 for qualified provider. The largest one, as you could probably imagine, would be the health participant safeguards. DHCF, we have a large amount of oversight over this particular assurance. And as I noted earlier, as it relates to financial accountability, we have all of those assurances oversight as it relates to reporting to CMS if we are good fiscal agents of how we are spending and monitoring the Medicaid waiver dollars. One of the new performance measures that I'll discuss further, we added that to our administrative authority waiver. So we administrative authority oversight. Originally, we had 2 of these performance measures, so now we have 3. And we'll get into discussion as to why we then added this 3rd performance measure. Right, so here's a breakdown of just noting the performance measure as it relates to the CMS standard of 86%. So this is the compliance standard as of June 30th, 2023. For the administrative authority, percentage of providers that met oversight compliance. And so again, this is what I will be providing more detail on in the latter part of the presentation. We also have qualified providers. Providers correct identified deficiencies cited during your certification review. So this particular measure is related to the PCR reviews that are currently being conducted at DDS. And as it relates to financial accountability, this relates to a percent of claims reviewed by our program integrity here at DHCF. When our Office of Program Integrity goes out and they conduct their audits, we're ensuring that the services that were rendered, there is supporting documentation to support that. And so sometimes that office might find that some providers don't have the supporting documentation, and so therefore the Office of Program Integrity will seek to recoup some of those funds that were paid to providers. So this is the part that I mentioned earlier. This is the new performance measure that we added to the waiver for this year. This is, again, brand new. And so I'm going to give you an overview of exactly how we are conducting this review, because you're going to start seeing more people from healthcare finance, or my colleagues and I, out conducting these visits, and you might see us more than one time a year. So we select a random case uh, of 5 individuals. We look at random providers. So this is all randomly generated, and we base that random generation from our expenditure report. We are then, once we get our sample, basically, again, looking at 5 participants per provider, we then go into MCIS and we get a snapshot of the person, the ISP, and also the waiver services that he or she might be receiving. Finally, we then go look at the claims. We look at the claims because in those claims, we identify a certain period. And so in that period, that will be the period in which the review will be conducted. When we contact you, the provider, to schedule our monitoring visit, we try to be courteous when we do send a courteous email, at least a week in advance. And in that email, we inform the provider that we are looking at documents such as claims. We're also looking for quarterly reports, in addition to progress notes, staffing charts, and the timesheets of your staff covering the particular period in which we were reviewing the claims for. Finally, when we're on site, we expect to be at your site between 1 to 2 days. So it just depends on the size of the provider. Currently, we are, I would say for the most part, we are pretty much doing 1 day. Excuse me for 1 second, please. Um, Okay, everyone, I apologize about that. Thank you very much, whoever unmuted me. All right, so as I was saying, I'll just start from not the beginning, but I'll just let you know where I stopped. So as it relates to the review that we're conducting at the site visit, we will be at your site at least 1 to 2 days. And during that time, we look at all of the documentation that we informed you in the email and for that particular time period. And so, for example, if we were looking for claims for the months of January and February 2023, we would expect to see all of your supporting documentation for that time period, as well as staff sheets and any additional service authorization or staffing documentation to support the delivery of service. Okay, so here are the 5 indicators that are on our tool. And so for each indicator, again, we are looking at the records of 5 waiver participants. When we look at the first indicator and it discusses the part of service provision in alliance with waiver provider billing, we are basically looking for documentation to support the services that were rendered. Again, we need to see those timesheets, any data collection sheets, any progress notes, any quarterly notes, all of the documentation that will support that you actually facilitated that service. As it relates to any discrepancies in documentation, we're looking for very detailed notes to ensure that it entails the date as well as the signature of the person who rendered the service. And it also needs to be, and also the time in which the service was being rendered as well. Sometimes you might see that a particular a service was perhaps documented on one date, but you don't have supporting documentation. It was noted what happened on one date, but the claims data doesn't match with the documentation that you have on site. As relates to your staffing ratio being maintained, we know that certain services require that staffing ratio. For example, if you think about the companion service, and so we're ensuring that whatever that person is supposedly receiving, that there should be documentation to support that, the rendering of that service. And also, overlapping waiver services. We should not be seeing waiver services occurring at the same time. Of course, we would look at whatever rule that we have for that service, and we should not see that perhaps one staff person is rendering more than one service. And finally, is the provider delivering the services authorized? We are looking to see if you have your service authorization. Exactly what have you been built? What are you billing for? That you actually have, again, that supporting documentation to match that. All right. So next, we have a sample of our non-compliant findings. To date, we've gone out, I think, at least 3 times this year. So what we are seeing so far is progress notes missing start and end dates, copying and pasting of notes, missing signatures of documentation such as quarterly and daily notes, no documenting of the goals or progress being made toward goals, and timesheets are not matching the service and support provided to the waiver participant. Now, this is just a small sample because I would note for the most part, providers are adhering and have good records. But these are some of the findings that we have found to date for being non-compliant. So when we think about our, excuse me for 1 second. Going back to our CMS standard of 86%. So for less than 86% for each indicator of your tool would trigger an OFIP, and OFIP we call Opportunity for Improvement Plan. And when we see an indicator with less than 86%, that might trigger the need for further analysis to determine the cause of the performance problems. If we start to then see this, I guess, consistency amongst providers, we here at DHCF and then meeting with our partners there at DDS, we will discuss if it's, we need to implement a quality improvement project, which must be developed and reported to CMS. Again, 86% is the standard established by CMS, and we adhere to that standard across all of our waivers and reporting. So a little bit more detail about the opportunity for improvement plans. It's submitted for each indicator below 86%. So out of the 5 questions or indicators that I showed you on the 2 previous slides, if one of those indicators were below 86%, the provider would then create this opportunity for improvement plan. It's just basically the strategy, and it shows pretty much what you're going to do to mitigate or ensure that this doesn't happen again over time. And so we expect to see an opportunity for improvement plan. What is your strategy? How do you plan to monitor the situation, again, to ensure that there's no reoccurrence of this in the future? The OFIP must be returned to DHCF within 5 business days of receipt of the findings that you get from us. Typically, once you then receive those findings and you respond back, letting us know what your plan is as it relates to the OFIP, we are here at DHCF to provide technical assistance to you. And then once we then give that technical assistance, we then are able to then share the data with DDS through our quarterly reporting. So here's some points to remember when developing an OFIP. We want to note that corrective actions will implement to address the identified deficiency areas. Also note what continuous quality improvement interventions will be implemented to ensure that deficient practices will not be repeated. And finally, how the CQI continuous quality improvement plan will be monitored to ensure that these findings will not reoccur, and anticipated completion date for each remedial action. So we would expect to see when you do submit your OFIP, by when do you expect for this to actually happen? And so giving us the completion date, again, we will know that in the future, if myself or one of my colleagues were to return, we would expect to see that the provider has implemented a plan to ensure that we don't have a widespread reoccurrence of the situation. And finally, on this page, here's some links that we provide as it relates to the IDD and IFS and regulation waivers. If you were to then click on the links, it will take you directly to the rules. And also we provided links for the IDD and IFS waivers as well, so you can see the entire waivers for these services. I just want to send, Mary asked me to then send apologies because she's having technical difficulties. But if you have any questions, feel free to ask at this time.
So I am having technical difficulties, but can you hear me?
I can hear you, Shasta.
Okay, all right. So there's a question in the chat. It says, are you saying that staff shouldn't work more than one service? For example, if a staff work IDS, they are not there any work in, wait a minute. Okay, can they work in in-home support, supported living, or companion?
We say whatever the rule says, and I don't want to be as broad, but looking at the rule, if you have the rule before you, and when we come in, we monitor the rule, we solely look at the rule. So I don't want to say without not having the rule before me right now, but if you follow the rules, you will be okay.
Ali, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Mary.
Okay. Yeah, so, it should not be, because of the staff shortage and all that, you may be kind of covering one shift here and another shift another way. what we mean by duplicating the services. For example, the same staff should not be at the same time providing the service. That kind of duplication is what we look for. But you, in terms of maximizing your staff resource, is not an issue for us. And I'm very, very sorry about having these technical issues and not being able to join in WebEx. However, I want to reiterate to the provider community, you may be wondering, what does this all mean to us as a provider? It is high time that each provider look at the regulations that is governing your service delivery. If you're getting authorization for supported living, read the rules related to supported living, set the system to operate that service, ensure your staff are trained, documenting it appropriately the way it is intended to, timesheets, progress notes, and sending the quarterly reports, all that is being done. And I highly recommend that each provider look at all these kind of quality checks before you submit a claim. So if we all collaborate and coordinate our efforts, our performance in these areas can be improved. And I know I missed the beginning of the session, which I meant to cover is that, I'm sorry, Shasta, I'm taking up on your time. But what we wanted to convey was that providers failing the audit standard, that performance measure have been non-compliant and below 86% for the past 3 years. We tried to collaborate with the DDS in terms of coming to the provider meeting, sharing the feedback, educating the provider, issuing plan of correction to those providers and recouping the amount. All that have been done so far. However, we don't see the systemic improvement. And that is the reason we need to come with a different approach, inserted this PM in the new waiver that was approved for October 1, 2022, and DHCF long-term care staff are going to be coming out to review the program. So that is in a nutshell that I wanted to kind of communicate to you guys. And also I want to send some information about our ARPA fund project, because there have been improvement noted for providers with electronic healthcare records. And this is an opportunity for IDD waiver providers to maximize your EHR or implement EHR system. So I'm going to plug in some information. I'm going to send, I'm sure Shasta, being a pivotal person for that committee, have already shared this information with you guys. We will send this information to you so you can contact DHCF's HICRIA unit to get more information on how you can take advantage of setting up electronic health records. And that will improve documentation and also increase the transparency. That is all I have to say. And again, apologize for the technical issues.
That's okay, Mary. No need to apologize. It looks like we're all having technical issues today. There are a few more questions in the chat. And to your point, Mary, the ARPA initiative, the group has presented at one of our meetings about the electronic health records. So there has been ongoing discussions, and that group is in communication with some of the providers who have agreed to participate in that initiative. There are a few more questions in the chat, so I want to go ahead and get to those so we can move on to the next agenda item. How many days prior to monitoring would you notify the provider for the review?
It'll be 1 week, Shasta, at least 1 week.
Okay, when will providers be notified about this review, and when will the review start?
So to date, we've already started conducting reviews. We're currently in the process of conducting some now. Again, we use a random sample. On average, they're about, when we look at the claims data, there are about 144 providers per month that we see. And of course, we then generate our random sample and we then go from there. But like I inform providers, just because you're seeing me now doesn't mean that you will not see me again or a colleague from my office. So again, we're starting now, and you might see us more than one time. It all depends of how the randomness of the data is presented to us.
Okay, the next question. So if a staff person, same, is working companion services for 8 hours, then they are working a different waiver service for in-home support for 8 to 11 p.m., same day, same person, that's acceptable. A staff working about 16 hours a day minus lunch.
If that is what the provider arranged for that person and agreed upon, and as long as we don't see any conflict, I don't, we don't side on those kind of scenarios.
And in addition to that, also, Mary, would note though too, is that again, it goes back to the documentation. Ensure that you have that documentation that tells that story. Again, we've seen situations like this, and providers have had documentation. So providers, if we haven't visited yet, at least now you know you need to have very concrete documentation to support a staff person in this nature right here.
Okay, thank you. All right. I don't see any additional questions, so thank you, Mary and Ali.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so next, Chioma, I am going to unmute you. Let me make sure you're still here. Yes.
You can hear me okay? Can you hear me?
And you should have presenters rights.
Yeah. Are you able to hear me? Are you able to hear me? Are you able to hear me? Can you hear me? Oh, I'm sorry. Now I see the chat. Everyone is saying, yes, you can hear me. Okay, I will share now. All right. So, hi again. I'm Dr. Chioma Wachuku, supervisory nurse consultant at Health for Health and Wellness at DDS. So, just going to talk about the transmittal that will be coming out for recommending cardiopulmonary resuscitation or CPR drills. And okay, so some of the objectives for today is just to be able to discuss the importance of conducting cardiopulmonary resuscitation or CPR drills, and to be able to discuss when to stop and hand off during CPR. So part of the reasoning behind this coming up, some gaps have been noted. With the Mortality Review Committee, there's been, they have seen an increase in reports from emergency medical services or EMS personnel that indicate CPR is not being performed upon their arrival to the scene. At the same time, incident reports entered by providers indicate that CPR was initiated. However, the gap is that CPR is not being continued once EMS arrives and before EMS takes over. So valuable life-saving time and measures are being lost at that time. Certainly, I can think back to when I was in training and had to respond to a patient's room that was coding and had to provide CPR, or CPR needed to be provided. And someone yelled out, grab some normal saline. I bolted and ran out of the room. It was so much easier to be the runner than to be physically present in the room for the situation that was occurring. So, but one of the ways to help get around that fear, the anxiety, uh, the stress that comes along with dealing with such a situation is to practice. And so, therefore, recommending that drills be instituted on a quarterly basis to practice the skills, do both unannounced and announced drills. So one of the ways, and this is just a sample, to assist with trying to implement such a drill, you want to look at the personnel that's needed. So looking at first, having just one responder or having two responders. In each situation, you're going to need a drill observer, so someone that is observing with everything that's going on. You'll need a staff person who pretends to be unresponsive and pulseless, and then another staff person to be either, if it's just one responder, to be that first responder, or when you have two people, for the third person to be the second responder. And then the staff will just switch off into role play each role. Additionally, one of the things, another thing that to do when you're looking at the drill activities is to, for the first responder, is to call 911. So you want to have place the call and put the phone on speaker. It's been shown that there is a greater likelihood for the person to survive when you get help to assist in that whole CPR process. So big thing is to get 911 on a phone and get them on their way to you. Then initiate CPR. You want to continue the CPR, very important step here. Continue CPR until the second person responder arrives, and that could be another staff person in the home, or it could be EMS. But chest compressions are continuing until someone says, "I'm ready to take over," and they pick up exactly where you left off and start compressions. Because if you think about it, just as our hearts are beating and continuing to beat without stopping, you then become that heartbeat for that person. As you continue to do the chest compressions, then you're continuing to give them a heartbeat. Once you stop, the heartbeat stops. So think about it in that situation, in that manner, as to why it's important to make sure there's someone there to take over before you stop doing chest compressions. Because no compression, no beat. So just one way to look at it in that manner. So that's what we want to convey to the staff and ensure that they're doing the compressions in that manner and understand the premise behind it and why they have to continue even when EMS arrives and they're setting up and getting ready. They want to continue those chest compressions. So similar activities with the two responders. However, the first responder just jumps right in and starts CPR. The second responder can get into calling 911 and getting help on the way. Again, you're continuing the CPR process, and you can use the two rescuer CPR. And once EMS arrives, much like just when it's the first responder and they physically take over doing chest compressions, then we can make the other necessary notifications, get the health passport, and get the person ready to transfer to the hospital. But the important takeaway is that chest compressions continue until someone is going to take over from you. And there are oftentimes a lot of activity around you when that's happening, particularly when the second person arrives. It's still to be mindful that it's important to continue and know and be ready to switch out once the other person is ready. But that the compressions continue is the main thing. And then once that is done, you do a debrief. So the person who was observing the drill can now comment on whether the timing was good. We're looking at CPR skills, and that the chest compressions did continue when the second responder arrived and was ready to take over, so that we closed that gap of that occurring and it seeming like CPR is not being done. But yes, we recognize that it's definitely being initiated. However, just in the midst of everyone coming in, it's very easy to stop at that point and say, okay, well, they're here now, and let them take over. But we want to be sure that we continue the chest compressions. And the drill observer is a great person to identify any opportunities for improvement during that process, and comment on what else can be added or done differently. So that's it. That's essentially it for this. And the transmitter will include a refresher on the actual CPR skills to assist in actually performing the drill and setting that up for you. So it's there for your convenience. And I'll take any questions that anyone has.
Thank you. Are there any questions? I'm checking the chat. Okay, Chairman, I don't see any questions. I am going to go to the next presenter, which is performance overview. Charlotte, I am going to unmute you and give you presenter's rights.
Thank you, Shasta. Good morning, everyone.
Okay.
Hopefully everyone is as safe and well, especially given the heat advisory that we're under. Let's see here. In case you have forgotten, technology always wins. So kudos to all of our presenters and hosts who has really prepared some great content for everyone. So hopefully you all have been able to stay tuned and stay engaged. So again, I am Charlotte Roberts, the Performance Management Program Manager here at DDS. And before we get started, I certainly want to take the opportunity to, given some of the comments that have been placed in the chat thus far on just staffing, I am also the contact that you or someone at your agency may have heard from in the past few weeks regarding the State of the Workforce Staff Stability Survey. So DDS is participating in this national data collection to include in-person interviews, interviews with families, as well as contacting provider agencies to collect some really rich information on wages, staff shortages, and just any issues and problems that staff have been able to document regarding their DSPs. So one great way that we all can contribute to expanding the knowledge base of what's happening with this critical workforce is really providing information via that survey. So I will continue to follow up as we are rapidly approaching our deadline. And given how important this data collection is to us, we are willing to accommodate some concerns if the timing is a bit of a delay in terms of the short turnaround. So again, please adhere to those guidances and emails, and thank you to all of those who have responded to the call thus far. So kind of getting to where we are right now with the presentation, similar to what we talked about at our last provider leadership meeting, and a great compliment to the presentation from Ali and Mary with DHCF, is that we just want to take this time to specifically go into the data that we've presented through our quarterly reports to CMS, just to give a bit more context to this system of data collection and the system of service delivery that we talk about, but really how that impacts, the documentation that we look for, how that truly impacts the provider oversight and compliance mandates that we are required to adhere to via CMS and DHCF. So again, we all kind of work in tandem to not only collect information and provide that information regarding areas that are underperforming, but we also want to collaborate with the provider community. It's not all punitive. It's not all, we aren't here we know the importance of the work you do, and we know the importance of us collaborating to not only find solutions, but also maintain these solutions. So as we kind of go through this data, not only hear our role in terms of oversight, but also take responsibility and accountability for your part in that remediation and that solution. So again, for every measure on a quarterly or monthly basis that's below that standard of 86%, we are required as the operating agency of the waivers, and DHCF is that administrative authority. We are required to provide some type of remediation and oversight plan so that we know how we are planning strategically to get things back on board. So we're going to specifically run through those measures that were found under compliance in this most recent waiver report that covered the time period of January through March 2023. So again, to kind of reiterate the assurances that were presented in Ali's presentation from DHCF, not getting into the specifics, but it is, in terms of a data collection effort, important to kind of know where all this work fits. It's not just a staffing ratio documentation. It's not just a plan, but it's something that helps us to assert that not only are we able to show that providers can adhere to a single occurrence of compliance, but also there's evidence in place that can assess that there's a system of compliance in place, so that whether it's a PCR review, a DDS reviewer, or a DHCF reviewer, each instance of a review will still see that same effective documentation, that same system of proper record keeping. Again, it's not the single occurrence that makes someone compliant, but it's the system of record that is really what's most important. So again, these are the three. We have administrative authority, level of care, qualified providers, participant-centered planning and service delivery, health and welfare, participant safeguards, and then lastly, fiscal accountability. So with our first, let's get that out of the way. Sorry if you guys can see that. So with our first measure, it's the percentage of providers that met oversight compliance. I know Ali and Mary kind of went into the kind of revised method of monitoring that will go into place, given Mary's point of there's certain measures where we've continued to find ourselves under compliance for a significant amount of time, a multiple year span. So again, that may show that while we may have single occurrences of compliance, how are we impacting our system? How are we working to ensure that it's not just a pattern of making something correct for the review, but also we're just understanding the importance of having it consistently correct throughout the life of a case, and the sustainability of that documentation. So for this measure, it was 9 out of 15, just 60% in compliance. So there were 6 providers that were found out, and those areas of non-compliance were specifically relating to staff training. Again, some of that specifics when we're talking about documentation, are the dates in the right place? Is the documentation, doesn't include all the right signatures, doesn't include the specific times that align with authorizations or claims and things like that. It's not necessarily just that you have it, but is it in the correct format that really aligns with the expectations of that data collection and that service delivery. For our next area, again, under that insurance category of administrative authority, providers correct identified deficiencies cited during certification reviews. Again, this is aligning with PCR, which is the same area of concern that we addressed during our last provider leadership meeting with 81% compliance, and that level was 86%. So with about these 12 deficiencies that were not closed on time, which as of now they are closed, the majority of them, as you can see, kind of aligned with, again, staff training, quarterly reports, and then evidence of health promotion activities as stated in a plan or as necessary by follow-up for another concern or request. There's also some kind of one-off deficiencies that are related to, again, protection of rights, understanding of roles, and then the appropriate documentation that is needed to sufficiently align with the service requests or the need for compliance given that specific aspect of the PCR review. And lastly, another PCR measures where certified providers train staff according to DDS policies and procedures. We're at 65% for this measure, which is about 7 providers found out of compliance. And again, it's relating to that phase 1 through 4 training. And again, as if there's any word, if there's any theme that we're finding in our data as of late, it's the presence of consistent documentation, and that it's aligning with the standards from all different reviewers. So needless to say, it's in addition to collecting this information on non-compliant areas, DDS is working closely with DHCF to further understand this trend in this specific area of non-compliance, given that it seems to be a immovable dough, a running line across all of our different areas of monitoring. How can we continue to collaborate to not only further understand the issue presenting itself that's kind of causing documentation to be such a consistent concern, but how are we making sure that our training methods and our information that's being disseminated is not only consistent, but there's also a system in place at the provider agency to make sure that training and that maybe that train the trainer model is in place as it should be. So we continue to work together and collaborate, knowing that providers have their roles and understanding the policies and procedures, the rules, the expectations, the needs of the workforce, but also the needs of people supported. As there are changes in policies, and Dr. Chioma just mentioned a transmittal that will be released in terms of reiterating the importance of CPR drills. Again, as we review data and we review reports, we will make sure that we can translate that information in a way that continues to support our providers, but also knowing that we share accountability in this system of service delivery. And lastly, as always, your QRS serves as a vital link to communication with the agency and support. So please continue to utilize that access point to DDS. And if anyone has any other questions or concerns, please feel free to contact me or Shasta. I'm sure she will continue to communicate any needs or questions that come through her that need to be addressed from performance. So that's it for me. And if there are any questions, I can certainly take them now, or we can hold them to the end. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Charlotte. I am monitoring the chat to see if there are any questions. Okay, I don't see any questions, Charlotte. Thank you. Marion and Michael, I am going to unmute you and give Marion presenter rights.
Thank you, Shasta. Could you also unmute Katrina and Jaleesa for me as well? Can you all hear my screen? Hear me or see my screen?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Well, first, just want to say good morning to everyone, and thank you, Shasta and DDS, for inviting us to this meeting and to have an opportunity to share with you all some updates for the PCR process. And I'm Marion Olivier, and with me today that's presenting is also Mike Marshall and Katrina Tyro and Jaleesa Miles. And what we're going to do is go over the updates that you all can expect actually starting July 31st, so Monday. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to, well, actually what we're going to do is first start off with the data collection updates and how we're going to collect data in our internal application and why we're making this change. And as I mentioned, these changes, and you'll start to see this information and the results of the data that we'll be collecting, this new data, starting July 31st. All right, so turn it over to Mike.
Okay, thank you, everybody. So as most of you know that have been through the PCR process, we work very collaboratively with DDS and you as the providers to really focus on the quality supports and service delivery systems that are provided to the people that you all support with IDD and developmental disabilities. Again, as you know, we do this by ensuring we're collecting and reporting on the data and information in a way that it can highlight the areas of strength and the areas that may need improvement. With the information that we gather, any areas that need improvement can be targeted and worked on either at a district or provider level. We do this now as part of the PCR system, but we also want to do it better. This is what fueled the changes that we're going to talk about with you today.
Thanks, Mike. Now we're gonna turn it. Okay. Now we're going to turn it over to Katrina.
Good morning, everyone. One change that we'll be making with this is the way that we collect our data. We're updating our data collection system to specifically detail the information that we're looking for when we're scoring the indicators. You can see two examples of what we'll be looking for directly from DDS policies, regulations, and the waiver procedures. We've done this for all the indicators that are included in the PCR review. So as you can see in our example here, and this is just two of the many indicators we review, there's the indicator about if a person has an identified need to use adaptive equipment or durable medical supplies. Is the equipment or durable medical supplies in good repair? So we would specifically be looking for evidence that the person's adaptive equipment, if it was not in good repair, that there was documentation to reflect any actions that were taken. If we had the same case with durable medical supplies, again, we'd just be looking for the actions taken to address the repair of the equipment. Finally, per requirement for service providers who need to verify the status of the in MCIS of the adaptive equipment that happens on a monthly basis, we're looking for that in MCIS. Another example we have is that services are being provided in accordance with the waiver prior authorization and the ISP. So again, we're going to be looking at that waiver prior authorization and make sure services are in alignment with that, and also reviewing the ISP to make sure that we have that in place. Next slide. Some of the reasons that we want to do this is it makes sure that we see continued consistency in what's being reviewed by all quality surveyors. Make sure that all the rules and regulations associated with each indicator are being evaluated for compliance. It provides a better understanding of what the specific rules and regulations are. That's for us internally, that's for providers, that's for all stakeholders in the process. We get more specific data collected to better identify the areas, the trends needing improvement at the provider and the district level. And it gives specific reasons why the indicator is scored no, so that the provider knows specifically what to address when we score those indicators. So that being said, what it's leading to is some changes in our reports. One of the specific changes that you will see is in our CAP report. Some of you may have already seen this as it went into effect at the beginning of this month. Basically, there are instructions. We've updated those to match what's required in the CAP. Originally, some of the responses we were getting to the CAP were not being approved because it would only talk about a specific issue with a person. And in collaboration with DDS, we want to make sure that there are also steps taken by the provider to prevent future reoccurrence of any of those issues for all people served. So we have added a new section to our CAP to make sure that everything is included and those corrective action plans can be approved. Now, granted, we don't control what you write in those two sections, so you want to make sure that your responses answer the questions. Responses to the no indicators, they have to directly address the problem cited. And then you also want to make sure that there is a plan for the overall practice for the organization. That's going to be in the section below. So you're going to detail out what systems and processes you're going to put in place to prevent reoccurrence of the specific issue that was identified. And then the system for overall. Both should have detailed strategies for resolving the problem, maintenance of the plan for correction, a timeline or date when the provider expects the problem to be corrected, and who is responsible or the people responsible for ensuring that the indicator is corrected. And we have some other changes. I'm going to pass it over to Jaleesa. Thank you.
Okay, hi everyone. So as Katrina mentioned, we do have some changes to our report. The detailed report is another report that has some changes. You will still receive copies of this report at the end of your review, along with your PCR, your final report, and the CAP. Some of the changes, and if you could click next. Perfect. Some of the changes, there aren't any changes to the identifying information, as you can see on the screen. In addition to the overall score for each domain area. And also the identifier, the actual indicator, the number of yes answers, the number of no answers, the total record score, also the percentage of yes answers, and the number of NA answers. And you can see on the right-hand side, the key number, of course, is for any of the, it identifies the person served number in the sample. And so if there is a no answer for that particular indicator, the person's number would be listed on that right-hand side. Did you click next again? Perfect. And so in this red box that's outlined, you can see that this is the no answer for each of those identified indicators. So that would be the no response on this detailed page. And so anything that is scored as no, of course, has the identified key and it has a reason there. And so the data on this particular sheet is only for the person-centered, it's at the person-centered outcome level. And then our surveyors, they will continue to include any specifics as to why the indicator was scored as no, and it may include some specific TA as well. All right. Perfect. And so this next page is showing everything from the organizational level. And so here you can see this will be the second spreadsheet on this detailed report. It's similar to the previous example that we just went over. And then so it will show the no reason for each section that you can see is highlighted. One thing to take note of is on this page, anything that is scored as yes or NA, there will not be a no reason listed here in that box on the right-hand side that's highlighted in red. Okay. And Mike is actually going to take over for the process changes.
Okay, if you can go to the next slide, Marion, please. So we've already been doing some of this with the providers that we've done PCRs with, but just as a reminder, we know it's important to not only you, but also to be for us to be least intrusive to the services and supports for the people that you support. Therefore, we put some of these processes in place for the entrance. All entrances will be conducted remotely the morning of the first day of the review, usually about 9 o'clock. After we're done the entrance, we will email the samples, and then the team and the lead will travel to your site. And then the deadline for record submission on the first day is 2 o'clock for any offsite records. And then the exit, if you score an excellent or satisfactory, it will be conducted remotely. If you score less than that, we will have to come on site.
All right, so that is all of the updates that we have that are either, like Mike mentioned, some are in effect already, and
Yeah.
but others will be taking place on starting Monday. And so just thank you guys for having us, and just wanted to see if there's any questions from anyone.
Thank you. I am monitoring the chat to see if there are any questions.
Stop sharing my screen. It says if you score.
Okay, so if you score excellent, is the next review going to be virtual?
No. Our reviews are now on site. And so we'll be on site.
Okay.
Like, as I mentioned, as Mike mentioned, the entrance will be virtual, and potentially the exit might be virtual, depending on how you score during that particular review. Hope that helped answer your question.
All right, I don't see any other questions, so I am going to move on to the next agenda item. That's the human care agreement. So Renelle, I am going to unmute you and Antoinette, and I will give you presenter's rights.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday. And I am just pulling up my screen. Please give me 1 second. Excellent. Uh-oh, I'm sorry. I had moved too fast. Let's see. Here we are. Okay. Again, good morning, everyone. My name is Renelle Roberts. I am the Provider Relations Supervisor here at DDS, and I hope everyone can hear me pretty clearly today. I'm just going to be before you very quickly just to discuss human care agreement renewals. Providers who are in their final option period should be aware that human care agreements are non-renewable at the end, at the conclusion of the fourth option term. We highly recommend that you apply for the vocational services solicitation 90 days before the expiration of your last option period. So if you are in your fourth and final option period, now is the time to engage with the Office of Contracting and Procurement and to reapply for an HCA with the district. And those solicitations go out in advance, and you can reach out to, again, the Office of Contracts and Procurement for additional information in reference to those invitations. This is to avoid delay in issuing you a new HCA. for everyone's clarification, once your HCA, for example, if your HCA ends on let's say August 31st, and you would like to begin work on September 1st, if you do not have an active HCA in place that has been executed by the contracting officer, you will not be able to begin work until you have that active HCA. And so there could be a delay in providing services to our clients if we do not have a fully executed HCA in place for you all. Okay. Other issues or other items that could cause a delay in issuing a new HCA is tax compliance. For all contracts and HCAs exceeding $100,000, the providers are required to provide a clean hands report. You can use the link here and visit mytax.dc.gov, the web portal. If you go into the middle of the screen, there's a section that says doing business with the district, and you can follow the steps in requesting a clean hands report. Secondly, you would need your certificate of insurance. Those requirements have changed. Well, they have not changed. They are now being heavily enforced in reference to insurance requirements. You can visit click on the link here on the slide deck, or you can visit the OCP website, which is ocp.dc.gov, and you can learn more about the necessary insurance requirements. You will also be required to have a valid business license, and that can be obtained and formerly called DCRA. Now is the Department of Licensing and Permits. You can go to their website to see how to obtain a business license. In addition, you will be required to complete a bidder offer form. Again, once this slide deck goes out or the information goes out, you can click on the links to obtain a bidder offer form. Okay. Providers are required to submit to the Office of Contracting and Procurement the total duration of their they're required to submit these items in advance before your HCA commences. Again, it's the tax compliance form, which is your clean hands, the valid business license, the certificate of insurance, and your bidder offer. Okay. If you not submitted your your COI requirements in a timely fashion, it could result that you will be placed on the do not refer list, and we do not want any of our providers on that list. So please, please, please work with the Office of Contracting and Procurement well far in advance and often to ensure that you are in compliance with your clean hands, your business license, and your certificate of insurance, so we can keep you all in providing services to our clients. All right. So we're going to go into the closing out of the fiscal year. FY23 is coming to an end. And our end of the year activities will begin on September 30th. Well, they actually won't begin on September 30th, but all FY23 activities will end on September 30th, and starting October 1st, we'll begin FY24. Providers must submit all outstanding invoices through July by August 10th. We need those invoices as soon as possible. We are encouraging you to send billing projections to your assigned CAs for the months of August and September. And we're asking you to review your purchase orders against your billing projections to ensure that your PO is significantly funded. You have the money that you need to get you through the end of the fiscal year. If your projections exceed the available funds on your PO, please alert your CA immediately so we can do the adjustments. As a reminder, no changes can be made to your FY23 PO after the fiscal year closes. So after September 30th, we cannot go back to your FY23 PO and make any changes. So please take this time now to make any to do your projections so we can, and if you need to have any adjustments, please let us know ASAP. Okay. PASS will shut down. This is at every year. PASS shuts down for a few days. However, this year, there is no indication we have received from OCP or OCFO that PASS will be shut down for a significant amount of days. So it will shut down on the 30th, and it will reopen on October 1st. And all new POs will be available. FY24 POs will be available for review at that time. Okay. October 15th of 2023 is the last day to submit your September invoices via the e-portal. So if you would like to get paid for your services for the month of September, we are asking that you submit those by October 15th, 2023. Here's some contact information. You have all of your CAs here. Ms. Taisha Battle, Ms. Kristen Best, Mr. Anthony Hodges, Mr. De'Aaron Mickles, myself, Renelle Roberts, and Ms. Antoinette Alexander. And we are here to support you and provide any guidance. And I hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you. I am monitoring the chat to see if there are any questions. Okay, I don't see any questions. I am going to, oh, okay, Pam.
Good morning. This is a sound check. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, good morning to everyone. I'm Pamela Harmon, the Medicaid waiver supervisor. And this morning I want to share with you and solicit your assistance and your continued collaboration, which we greatly appreciate in the waiver unit as it pertains to Medicaid renewals and financial eligibility application process. I'm also going to provide an overview of spend down, financial spend down, and medical spend down during this presentation. And we realize that the great work that we do to serve persons in the district with the intellectual and developmental disabilities cannot be done without your efforts. So I'll begin with Medicaid waiver operations. And basically, the Medicaid waiver unit will complete a renewal application for everyone who's enrolled in our home and community-based waiver, and that's inclusive of IDD or IFS waiver. Persons who are non-waiver must renew their Medicaid independently, and they receive notification in the mail in advance of their Medicaid renewal with instructions on how to renew their Medicaid either online or they can submit an application. And so also the waiver unit ensures that providers maintain compliance with DDA policy regarding personal funds and the monitoring of personal funds. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about how that occurs. And this is where I solicit your continued collaboration around ensuring that we monitor funds for persons, particularly who are employed or who have other means of income. So for persons employed, we want to make sure that we're accurately reflecting information in MCIS. So, excuse me, information in MCIS for persons employed, so that when we do submit their application to ESA, we have pay stubs that are uploaded in the finance section in MCIS that guide the application process, and allow ESA to have a complete packet, a complete Medicaid renewal packet when it's submitted. So if a person resides in one of our residential settings, residential rehabilitation, supported living, or host home, we ask that the residential provider upload those pay stubs in MCIS. And I'm going to provide you with a screenshot of where the pay stubs are to be uploaded. Now, if a person lives in their natural home, and if they do have an in-home support provider, we ask that the in-home support provider assist with uploading those pay stubs. And on some occasions, we may ask that the service coordinator upload those pay stubs, but nonetheless, they are needed for the renewal process, the application. And so those pay stubs need to be uploaded at the end of the month or as often as that person gets paid. And so on this screen, you will see the screenshot of MCIS where the pay stubs are uploaded. So you want to go to the person's record and select finances. And under finances, you will see person pay stubs, and you just select new and upload the document and save, and it will appear in that person's record, and we'll have it when it's time for that person to be renewed, for their Medicaid to be renewed. So in the Medicaid waiver unit, we work in collaboration with Operations Division, and we send out a 90-day renewal notification to everyone that's enrolled in our waiver. So you know in advance when a person's Medicaid is coming up for renewal. And it's also a nudge that the pay stubs, as well as the bank statements, need to continually be uploaded for that person, not only when it's time to renew, but as often as I stated, as often as you receive these statements, they should go into MCIS. And then there's no ask when it's time for renewal, because it's already there. It's already in MCIS and ready for us to pull and include as a part of that Medicaid renewal packet. Also, as a part of the Medicaid renewal is the Asset Verification System, or AVS. And federal regulations require all states to implement this program. And it includes age group, the following groups: age, blind, and disabled. And asset verification automatically retrieves financial information in review when determining Medicaid eligibility. And so this is utilized by ESA, the Economic Security Administration, when determining Medicaid eligibility. So that's why it's very important that we monitor a person's assets, and we're reporting timely by uploading documents in MCIS, as I previously discussed. And so asset verification will search all banks and financial institutions in the district and surrounding areas within Virginia and Maryland. And so ESA workers can see this data from financial institutions if a person has accounts in other states. And so it's better if we're in front of this AVS system and we're reporting it to ESA, as opposed to them finding out on the back end which could throw a person into being over the income or asset limitation. So I'll go more in detail about that. But basically, the takeaway here for AVS or asset verification is that we do need to ensure that this information is disclosed at the time of the person's ISP meeting or amendment. We want to make sure that this information, like I said, is uploaded, it's reported, and failure to provide this information could delay or prevent an individual's Medicaid recertification or benefits from being approved. So it is very important that we have this information on hand. So let's talk about financial eligibility. So all countable assets are used to determine financial eligibility for long-term care. And this includes cash, stocks, bonds, investments, and your savings and checking accounts, and any real estate that one does not, reside. And so over-resourced and over-income are defined as when a person exceeds the financial limitations for Medicaid. And so the countable resources and assets combined must be below the resource limit, which is $4,000 for Medicaid in the district and $6,000 for couples. So if an individual has countable income resources that exceed the $4,000, then the person is not eligible for Medicaid. This individual may choose to reallocate assets by completing a financial spend down. And that can include transferring monies to a special needs trust. And we can submit that evidence along with the application for review by ESA. And when I say we, I mean the Medicaid waiver unit. So over income, like I said, is when the person has a resource limit over the 4,000, and persons, families, conservators, providers are responsible for coming together and discussing how these large sums of money can be managed or transferred into either a trust account or another sheltered account that would not count as an asset for the person. So due to the limitation of the financial spend down, it must occur quickly. And evidence of that spend down, either a bank account, joiner agreement, must be sent to designated DDS in a timely fashion. And so in the Medicaid waiver unit, we do reach out when we determine that a person is over the income limit. Once it's discovered, we send out email notification to include the provider and the assigned service coordinator for the person as notification. And so when we calculate the income for a person, we look at the Social Security payment. The maximum Social Security payment for 2023 is $914. And so that's multiplied by 3 to come up with the monthly income cap of $2,742. And so if a person's income exceeds the cap, they may be eligible for a medical spend down, but we won't know until we complete the exercise of submitting invoices, that is unpaid medical bills, to ESA along with the application for Medicaid. ESA has the final determination. They determine eligibility for Medicaid for all persons enrolled in our waiver. And so this information is important to be able to submit it to ESA timely so that they can make a determination if the person qualifies for a medical spend down. And a medical spend down is determined for a 6-month budget period. And once the individual meets that spend down obligation, the individual will be automatically enrolled in Medicaid from the first day that they determine that you're eligible throughout that 6-month budget period. I would also add that ESA sends out a notification to the beneficiary, notifying them of approval and or denial of the medical spend down. So we have a benefits unit within the waiver, health insurance analysts who monitor people who are approved for medical spend down, who also upload the invoices to the portal for review by ESA. And the contact is Rachel Green. Her information will be at the end of this slide, along with other members of the waiver unit, should you need to reach out to any of us if you have any questions. And so we know that the Medicaid eligibility span is 12 months. However, in the case of a medical spend down, the budget period is 6 months. So that's why it's so very, very important to keep the invoices, the unpaid medical bills coming on a monthly basis so that they can be uploaded into the portal. Rachel Green or myself, we are available for questions. Should you receive notification that a person does not meet eligibility because they're over the income limit and could potentially be considered for medical spend down, we can discuss this process with you in greater detail. And like I said, we do send out notification to persons who are identified as over-resourced or over-income. We send it to the person-centered team via email, and it is the responsibility of the team members to acknowledge, to respond, and to continue to collaborate as you've done so to address these matters timely. And so if a financial spend down is not completed timely for the person, it does impact their eligibility for DC Medicaid. And it could lead to a lapse in their Medicaid coverage. So that's pretty much what I wanted to cover with you this morning with regards to Medicaid renewals, the financial eligibility application process, the financial spend down, as well as the medical spend down. And I'll pause to see if there are any questions in the chat.
Thank you, Pam. There is one question in the chat. What is the process if a person refuses to submit their pay stubs?
The process if a person refuses to submit their pay stubs is that the documented refusals would need to be that refusal would need to be well documented in MCIS, and DDS would need to have an internal meeting with the person-centered team to discuss the next steps. There are a couple of issues that arise from a person refusing to submit pay stubs. One, it jeopardizes their Social Security income because depending upon how much the person make, whatever their wages are, it could throw them into an overpayment status with their Social Security income, because Social Security also needs earned income statements to calculate how much they are entitled to collect for Social Security income. So that's one. And then number two, it could impact their Medicaid eligibility, and persons enrolled in our waiver must maintain Medicaid eligibility. Does that answer the person's question, or do they have another question?
Yes, it answered the first part, but then there was another question that came in.
Okay.
What is the process if the person refuses to provide a bank statement and pay stubs? The person signs a monthly that they have less than $2,000 in their bank account and are aware of the risk of losing coverage if they are found to be over-resourced. Additionally, they sign off on the refusal protocol quarterly. And also, if the person is not on SSI, what is the income limit for continued DC Medicaid coverage?
The income, the asset for DC Medicaid is 4,000. That's on one of my previous slides. So for and it's 6,000 for a couple. So the person that we're talking about, if they're not DC Medicaid, it sounds like we need to have an individual conversation to fully vet all of the issues that are being raised, because there's the DC Medicaid and then there's the SSI, and that would lead to my next question: is this person in a residential setting with DDS? So yes, please follow up with me. Thanks.
Thank you. They will follow up with you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I don't see any additional questions in the chat. Thank you, Pam. So we'll
Thank
move
you.
on to the next agenda item, which is telehealth utilization and then refresher information. Dr. Wendy Patterson is going to present. I am going to give you presenter's rights and unmute you. Oh, sorry, wrong person.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I feel like that should be on everyone's bingo card today. We love technology, right?
Are you able to present?
I am. I'm going to that slide now. I'm going to share.
Okay, great. Thank you.
It's a little slow. I apologize. Sorry, it's still just spinning. Okay, here we go, I think. Let me know if you see it, please. Can you see it now?
Not yet.
Okay, I can see it on my end. Can you see any window?
I've been having tough technical difficulties, so if someone else is able to see, but what's showing on my screen is Dr. Wendy Patterson is starting to share content.
Okay. It shows that I'm sharing on mine. I apologize. While we're waiting for that to come up, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm with Station MD. I've been with Station MD for about 15 months. My background comes from provider world. I was an executive director for a provider for 23 years in the state of Tennessee. And then after I left there, I was with United Healthcare, and we rolled out the very first ECF services out of Tennessee, which is Employment and Community First with United Healthcare. And once I discovered Station MD, I loved it. And so I came here so I could help Station MD help providers learn how to apply this telehealth to their everyday service deliverables. So that was just a little about me. I still see people saying it's loading.
Would you like me to share?
Miss Shasta, do you care? And
I can.
I will stop sharing.
Okay.
I apologize for the inconvenience.
No problem.
Perfect. Thank you. And if you want to just go ahead, next slide, please. I'm going to give you some data. This is some of the data for DC that is for June. And we're just going to briefly go through it. And Ms. Shasta has this slide deck so you all can take it away and look at it for your convenience for your provider. So this shows year over year comparisons from when we started in DC. And so you can see there that we're staying somewhere, you know, between the mid 30s to the mid 50s calls per month. So, and just for a little bit of perspective on that, there's, I think, and Ms. Shasta, please correct me if I misspeak anyway. I'm still learning some of the DC little nuances, but you've currently got a little over 1,500 folks. So the current utilization is about 2.5% is the utilization of Station MD currently in the district. Next slide, please. So this is the calls by agencies. And we're not going to go through this, but I wanted to make sure that you all had it as a takeaway so you could actually see, and most of you, all of you should get, I'm not sure how it's utilized per agency, but everyone should get, and if they don't, please let me know and I can look into it, a monthly report that comes from Station MD that shows you your utilization, your primary chief complaints of why people have called, and then the times, the days that that you're utilizing that. So we send you that so you can utilize it for your staffing allocations and stuff like that. So I just wanted to provide you all this. Next slide, please. I think it just extends more of the providers. So please use this as a takeaway, and you can crosswalk it with your monthly reports that we send you out. But we just wanted to go ahead and share that with you. Next slide, please. This is the calls per day of the week, and this is again for this calendar year from starting in January through June numbers. So you can see that out of the 1,500, I think it's 1505 folks that currently have access to Station MD, there have been 259 total calls to Station MD from January until June. And this just breaks it down to the days. And I will tell you that there is a very uniqueness to the district because a lot of calls happen on during the week more so than weekends. And we typically see a lot more weekend utilization in some of the other 28 states that we're in. So you all are very unique in some ways, but you can see here, and what we hope that this does by providing you this is to help you if you need extra staff, or if someone, you know, needs to go to the ER after we've assessed them or something like that. So this just tells you pretty much, like I said, what days that the district is currently utilizing Station MD. Any questions? I'll stop there and just ask for any questions with the data. Okay, next slide, please. And this is by calls by hour of the day. And of course, you can see the on the side there, January through June of this year, June being the one closest to the bottom. And this is in military time. So 0, of course, would be midnight, and then 1. And you'll see a jump from 1 to 6. That is by design. That's not a typo. So during the last 6 months, we've had no calls from 2 a.m. through 5 p.m. So that's interesting because, again, a lot of folks do use us during those times when your staff are typically on call and you don't have someone supervisory available, or your nurses are on call and they're not, you know, readily available just at the office or in the community. So this is just, it's a really good indicator of how your staff are using Station MD. And again, just use this, and hopefully it can be something that you all can use with your staffing allocations and treatment plans. Thank you. Next slide, please. This is just another grid of what you just saw, so you can see it just at a glance. And it does look like 9 a.m. seems to be the prime time that people are utilizing Station MD there in the district, and then followed by 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Again, typically what we do see is mainly after hours calls. So it's, you all use it. That's the beauty of Station MD, is it's flexible and it's very customizable and person-centered to the person's needs. Next slide, please. What you're seeing here are calls by outcome, and the blue is treat in place. So out of the 259 calls and assessments that we completed for the district from January through June, 241 of those were managed in place. And then you have 18, which is the yellow small little blocks, that actually were transferred to the ER. And I do want to say here, we did very well with Station MD, telling people that we were really great at an ER diversion, which we are. But we have organically grown in the last 6 years of being so much more than just that ER diversion. And we'll get into some of that in some of these slides. But I wanted you all to have a visual to see, and of course, again, by months, because that does matter. We typically see a drop off in July. I'm not really sure. I'm a PhD, not an MD, so I don't have a medical reason for that. But we typically do see July as a decline for calls and the transfers. Next slide, please. This is calls by diagnosis. And one thing that I want to talk about, and we're currently internally trying to work on this, calls by diagnosis is a little tricky when we send this out to providers, because these are the actual diagnoses that the doctors have concluded by the end of the assessment. What myself, coming from provider world, what I feel is more appropriate, the reports that we send out to providers are chief complaints of the call, because we know that direct support professionals aren't calling and saying, I'm calling because the person I support has conjunctivitis. So we know that those aren't the type of calls that we're getting. So this does show you the end result of why that call was made. But I wanted to go through very briefly, and it's not on this report, so I'm just going to read it to you. Some of the main chief complaints for the district are coughs, falls, vomiting, back pain, rash, car accidents. And I want to pause there for just 1 second, because we had a great engagement with one of the DONs there from one of the providers, and it was beautiful in the fact that they had a van, and the van had 6 people on it, and they were involved in an accident. It was a minor fender bender, hardly any damage to either vehicle, but of course they had to wait for the police to be there so they could get that police report. And it was about an hour and 15 minutes by the time the entire event was finished. And typically what would have happened is all those folks now would have had to been transported to the ER and then spent all that time in the ER to be assessed for traditionally the ER department to tell them to watch for signs and symptoms and to follow up with the PCP. So what they were able to do is take those 6 folks back to the convenience of their home, and then they use Station MD for that follow-up, which they reported was a blessing. So, and it was surprising because it looks like it was high volume, but it was really just 2 different events. COVID exposure was another reason for the chief complaint: lethargic, headaches, seizures, fever, leg pain, and diarrhea. So I just wanted to let you know of why staff were calling versus the outcome of that assessment, which is what you're seeing here. And next slide, please. And I think it's a continuation of some of those. Yes. Next slide, please. Okay. And I think that covers it. So again, this is, you can take this away. I think Ms. Shasta is going to share that with you all. So here's the thing. Here's what most people know. And we did, like I said, we did a really good job. This contract that we have with the district started I guess 20 months ago now. And of course, everybody's in the midst of the pandemic and people are just trying to survive, right? You want to make sure your people are healthy and they're well and that you have staff. So we failed to do a really good job of keeping up and telling people and reminding people, hey, use us as a resource. We are that ER diversion where people don't have to leave. But now that people can leave, we want to talk about some of that too. But we're just going to briefly do an overview of Station MD and then some of the things that you may not know about. So next slide, please. So you all know that Station MD lessens ERs and urgent care visits. It reduces the trauma and the anxiety for the person and the staff. It reduces exposure to illness and disease for the person and the staff. It's a cost reduction for the provider and the district. And it gives a better equity for healthcare models. And it's much more personalized experience because our doctors only support people with IDD. So if I wanted Station MD or one of you all wanted Station MD without that diagnosis of IDD and Medicaid or Medicare eligibility, we don't offer that service. Thus, we think that it gives an overall better quality of care, and it also reduces the adverse behaviors when healthy, right? I don't know how many times we had someone that needed to go to the doctor but didn't really want to go, and then we became the antecedent to an even larger behavior and incident because we needed them to go for a med refill, or if we just really felt that they needed to go. So this allows that to be lessened. Next slide, please. So here's some benefits to the provider. So you have, again, less ER visits and urgent cares, reduction in the stress to your staff and anxiety and to the person, but it also has your reduced exposure, which we just talked about. But when the person's exposed, which is terrible, you know, they are in their home. If you lose your staff to sickness and illness, it just contributes and exacerbates the already staffing shortage that you already have. It does reduce costs by you don't have to put people in cars, you don't have to pay mileage and transportation costs, and heaven forbid anybody would be in an accident or someone would have a negative behavior and assault somebody during those times when you were transporting folks to the ER. Those are all costs that providers have to think about when folks go, to the ER. And it's timely, right? Most of our assessments can happen from start to finish, depending on the chief complaint, the person's communication style, and the staff being prepared for the assessment. Most assessments last from start to finish less than 30 minutes. And typically most people can't get a staff there in the house in case you need someone to stay at the home and then somebody to take them, or to have to put everybody in the vehicle and transport folks. So it's just much more timely. And of course, the reduction in behaviors, and it truly is a customized health plan. Next slide, please. And this is just some of the main things, and some of them we just went over with why folks from the district are calling. Most folks call rash, pink eye, falls, vomiting, fever, cough, short of breath, UTIs, med refills. Med refills are a huge thing that people call Station MD for, which is great. Authorizations and clarifications. If you're outside your administration med time, you can use Station MD to call and say, hey, can we provide these meds? And then they will determine if yes, you can take this one, or no, hold this one until the next dose. And that really helps with your med variances. So you may have a med variance, but you don't have a med omission. And if you've ever tried to get a hold of your PCP after hours to determine that, it's typically 2 to 3 hours by the time it's solution. And by that time, the person's just missed the med completely. You can call us for behavior changes. We have a completely different service for behavior health, which looks different than the urgent care side that you all are currently using. But for minor behavior changes, people can use Station MD for that. Let's say somebody's on a behavior modification plan and they're having, just some anxiety and maybe some verbal escalation, then staff can utilize Station MD so the person can talk to somebody that they're not upset with, like their staff, and we can help de-escalate the situation. That time also allows staff to reach out to supervision and say, hey, I may need some extra staff, or this is what's going on. What's your directive on how to manage that? So it's really a great tool for staff, and it helps the person talk through some of the anxiety and stress and agitation that they're feeling. We can do return to work slips, return to program slips, stuff like that, and just general questions. A lot of times the person may go to their PCP because since we don't actually take the place of the PCP or just a value wraparound add to that, people will see their PCP and maybe one DSP goes to that appointment today and they get a new med, but that new med is not administered until bedtime. So then you have a different direct support staff that's going to administer that med, and they may have questions that the direct support staff that went to the visit didn't have. So they can utilize us for that as well. And again, we are on shift 24/7. It's not an on-call service. We physically have doctors that work shift work just like a brick and mortar building. Next slide, please. So let's think about when we have the assessment and we do determine that the person needs a higher level of care. So what our doctors are going to do is they're going to say, hey, Wendy, are you going to use, this particular ER that's in your chart? And I'd say yes. And then they're going to call ahead, which is fantastic. So now you have medical professional talking to medical professional and saying, hey, I've just completed an assessment with Wendy. Here's what's going on. She's en route. Please expect her. ER doctors love that because the reason most folks sit in ERs as long as they do is because they just don't know how to manage this population. And so, what we hope it also alleviates is just the wait time, but unnecessary testing and labs. If folks know that this is what the person's coming in for, they may, not do as many tests and labs that are unnecessary because they do want to be thorough. But, and a lot of times, I'm not sure about you all in your experience. However, I have sent people to the ER for one issue, and because they've sat there for 6 hours and then ended up having a behavior, then they get treated for an issue that they weren't even sent there for, and then they come back with medications that I spend the next 3 days trying to figure out how to DC and get into their PCP to see if this is actually really needed. So we do a great job of collaboration, and even though we don't replace the PCP, we collaborate with the PCP or specialist and the ER. Next slide, please. So here's some of the things that you may not know about StationMD because we didn't do a very good job telling people this in the beginning. Again, a lot of it due to the pandemic, and a lot of it that it's just organically grown to truly be person-centered and flexible for everybody. Next slide, please. So we told everybody that you don't have to leave home to access a physician, right? Which is true and great and perfect. But what happens if you are away from home, right? So I want to talk about that. I think I got my slides mixed up. I apologize. I'm going to come back to that. The one thing that we didn't do a very good job telling people is that anybody can join the station and the assessment from anywhere. So let's say your person's in their personal home with their direct support staff and they call StationMD, but the nurse would like to be part of that. The nurse can actually join just like a Zoom call. So all you have to do is let the navigator know, hey, I have somebody else that wants to join this call, and then they give you a private VPN to be able to join this, and it looks just like a Zoom call. And there can be as many people as the person wants, or it can just be the person, but this is great for nurses. It's great for conservatorship or guardianship. It's also great for families who like to be very involved. So we didn't do a good job letting people know that whoever the person wants or their guardian decides or the provider feels is necessary to be on that call can actually join that call. Next slide, please. So here's, again, this is where I was going back to, you can use StationMD in the privacy of your home, from your bed, your couch, wherever is comfortable for you. But here's some of the things that you can use StationMD for too, because we want people integrated, right? And part of their community and inclusiveness. So people didn't think, well, as long as I have a smart device, which is my phone, a tablet, or a computer, and either internet or cellular data, I can use StationMD anywhere I am, right? So in the privacy of your home, of course, anywhere that you have internet, like I just said, in a private space in your community. For an example, let's say someone is shopping in the community and they're leaving their local grocery and they trip and fall, scrape their knee, there's a contusion, it's slightly bleeding, there's an abrasion. So you can go to the privacy of your car or under one of the trees there in a grassy area, as long as it's a private space, and you can actually take that assessment with Station MD from there. You don't have to go back home and then assess it. You can actually do it there. And then that way, if you need, can your day go on, or do you need, transfer to your day program if you have one, or do you need to go see your agency nurse, or can you go about your day? A private space at your job. A lot of folks don't think about Station MD when they think about gainful employment. So we know how hard gainful employment is to get and even harder to keep, right? So if someone is at their job and let's say for this example, they're mopping and they slip and fall while they're mopping and they hit their elbow and, it hurts, but there's really nothing and for this example, we'll say they have their job coach on site. And nothing that the job coach can really see. So they can go to a private space, either in one of the back offices of where they're working, or again, a grassy area away from people, or in the vehicle, and they can take that assessment to Station MD right there without having to leave. And because our doctors are trained and understand the labor pains of getting and keeping gainful employment for this population, we might say, how much longer do you have on shift, Wendy? 45 minutes. Okay, I think you can stay on shift for 45 more minutes, and then I'll write you a script for Tylenol, which you already have a PRN for at home for fever, but I'll write it for elbow pain. So just think about that. You can take that anywhere for the person because we want them to go, do, and be. Again, in your vehicle, a private space at your provider agency. Home visits. We don't talk a lot about home visits, but the service for Station MD is for the person anywhere they are. So if we can help train people who just get a day service, if we can train their families and loved ones that support them outside of your facility or supervision, then we can help people stay in place and age in place longer, right? Because we've all seen that moment where people start having some medical complexities, and then that caregiver goes up to their support coordinator or their case manager and say, I can't do this anymore. Wendy's going to have residential services. And now that person's budget goes from $15,000 a year to $65,000 or $80,000 a year. And you can only hope that you have space for them in your residential program, because if not only does that person have to leave their home that they're accustomed to, they would have to go to a different provider where they didn't know anybody. So just some things to think about there. And of course, vacation. You can utilize Station MD on vacation. When you're pre-planning for folks to go on vacation, you don't always have to plan out, and route out all the ERs or urgent cares. They have that again at a click of a button. Any questions so far? Okay, I'm going to move on, and then someone can read me some of the chats. I think there was one that I saw through there. And another thing that we didn't tell folks is aftercare, right? So we do have aftercare for some of our visits, not all of them, just when the doctor feels it's necessary. But so if people get labs, or if people do get sent to the ER, then we have an aftercare team that will call and say, hey, we understand we sent you to the ER. We just want to follow up and see if there was anything else that you needed from us. So know that there is that aftercare team, and that's going to follow up per the doctor's directive if that's the case. Next slide, please. So what you're seeing here, we created a one-pager front and back, and a lot of folks use this in their residential sites, and it's just sort of a Cliff Note version for your DSPs. And I say this very lovingly and with no negativity at all. DSPs of today are not the same as DSPs of 10 years ago. They just don't have the life experiences that DSPs of 10 years ago have. So what we try to do, not only through this, making sure that they have a tangible resource to utilize during a crisis, I want to walk through very briefly what Station MD looks like versus what a brick and mortar building looks like, and think about this, something at 2 a.m. So at 2 a.m., if you have a DSP that's, new, been there less than a month, and there happens to be the person gets up and let's say for this example, they have a mild fever and a cough. So that 19-year-old DSP that doesn't have a lot of life experience yet uses your internal on-call system, right? So typically those on-call policies say that people have 15 minutes to call them back. 15 minutes is a fantastic time to call people back. But when you're young with not a lot of life experiences yet and you feel like there's a current crisis, then 15 minutes seems like a lifetime, right? So typically by minute 7, they've already called 4 other people, right? So what we hope to do is when you call Station MD, you get a live person when you call them. It is truly a call and a click. So people don't have to use Station MD to get fluent at it, to get comfortable with it. It's a call and a click. So when they call us, they get a live person, and that person will walk them through the whole process. So they don't have to know it well, the process well, to use it. They call, that person gets the chief complaint, and then they put them in our queue, right? Just like you would be in a brick and mortar building. So if you think about that step, when you walk in a brick and mortar building, the first person you see is the receptionist. That receptionist is going to ask you about your chief complaint, make sure that we have your insurance information, any consents that we need, and just getting you ready to see the doctor. So then the next step is that when you call Station MD, you'll get a navigator. That navigator is going to triage you just like if you were in a brick and mortar building and you're sitting in that waiting room and the person opens the door and says, "Hey, Wendy, come on back." So we're going to do that in that navigating part of Station MD. And just like a navigator, we're going to talk about your vitals. We're going to talk about your chief complaints. We're going to talk about your medications. In some incidences, in a lot of incidents, we have capabilities, if you all give us consent, to see your MARS. So depending on what EHR platform you use and give us consent, we can see MARS in live time. If not, the DSPs can tell us what the folks are taking, and that navigator triages all of that, gets everything ready, and then would virtually put your file outside the door just like you would in a brick and mortar building. And then the doctor comes by, picks your files up, does a snapshot, and then enters the room. And what that does is it enters that virtual room just like a Zoom meeting. And what we're hoping to do is at 2 a.m. with that new DSP, that we hope to lessen that crisis feeling that they have, so they don't have that crisis and they don't leave their shift and think, this is not for me and I'm not coming back. So hopefully by having that human connection at the time of call can help reduce some of that staff anxiety and hopefully retain some of your DSPs so they can become long-term DSPs. But back to this form. So this is just a snapshot. And then on the back is the next slide, please. And it just tells staff to remember to do this prior to the call. And it just is a sort of a guide. And a lot of folks laminate this and put it in like their med book, or if you are solely electronic, they may put it, in a private place where staff can access it during the time that they need to utilize Station MD. Next slide, please. So we offer tons of training, and Miss Chioma, I want to give her a shout out. She's been fantastic to work with and been trying to schedule and coordinate trainings for everyone to become acclimated and understand Station MD and its benefits and how you all can dovetail it into your everyday service deliverables. Like I said, you can use Station MD. It doesn't have to be just an emergency situation. Think about anything that you would use your doctor for. And we understand that nurses know most of everything that's going on just like the doctor does. Sometimes you just have to have that doctor's signature on something, or if nurses even think about this, think about your license, right? So if something's going on and you have any reserve whatsoever, the normal thing to do is to send someone out to the ER because you have a license to protect. And if you can't lay eyes on that person and you can't do that assessment, then that's going to be the natural step. Well, think about Station MD being sort of a safety net to that you can actually have the individuals call Station MD, and now we take on that responsibility. And then the nurse has actually done their due diligence, and it's not any kind of culpability or liability on your license. Now it's the medical professional. doctor that is taking on that responsibility. So think about us as a resource for everybody. We're not trying to circumvent nursing. We're not trying to circumvent PCPs or specialists. We truly just want to be a value add wraparound support. One of the ways that we do work with PCPs and specialists is if someone's used us, let's say somebody's used us 6 times in the last 45 days for seizure activity, and they do have a seizure protocol, but it's been outside their seizure protocol 6 times in the last 45 days, then what our medical staff would do is they would reach out and say, hey, we've noticed you've used us 6 times in the last 45 days, and we just wanted to know if you would like for us to share this information with your PCP so they can look at your symptoms and see what's going on and see if they want to reevaluate your treatment plan. We don't want to take that away from the prescriber. We're just here as a support. So we want to make sure that everybody understands that we're not trying to take on this responsibility. We just want to be an added value to it. So again, we're here we can give you written training, we can give you practice sessions, and we can give you training videos. The training videos are short and sweet. Most of them are less than 3 minutes long. And then Ms. Chioma, like I said, and I are trying to work where we're going to offer a training session every other month to begin with, I think it was. And we're still hammering that out, so don't take that exactly to heart yet. But we're going to offer a standing training that people can join and just get some refreshers and recharge and if they have any questions. But I just want to make sure that everyone knows that we're available for you all. I do want some of the things that I didn't have on a slide that I wanted to add is that current barriers right now for Station MD with the district is underutilization. Like I said, you have 1,500 folks that have access to Station MD, and we hope underutilization means everybody's well and healthy. But in case that's not the case, we just want to make sure that we're here if anybody has any questions. And I think that people just don't know, and we're so busy in our everyday lives. And this was something that was rolled out almost 2 years ago, and people just forgot about it. So we want to bring it back to the forefront. And then we want to make sure that people feel comfortable utilizing Station MD and making that first call, because we've talked to several DSPs there in the district, and once they've used us, they love it. They're like, oh my gosh, this is a great, resource for us. The same thing with a lot of the nurses and DONs that we're currently participating with. They were like, we use you all the time now that we know how to use you all. So just know that we own that, and we know we could have done better with making sure that you had that access, and we're here now to provide that. But some of the other barriers are just the fact that you all don't know how to weave it into your everyday service deliverables. And that's what I'm here for. I've been assigned the district to be just the engagement executive. So anything that you have, simple questions all the way down to you would like me to come and help, how to weave in this into like your on-call policy. We just did that for a very large multi-state provider. We sat down with them and we wove Station MD into their on-call policy, and it's working beautifully and the reason they did that is because they were having such burnout for their nurses, because their nurses were working their shifts, and then, they were on call and they were getting these calls, all weekend at 2 a.m. and those type things. And they did it 2 different ways. One of the states said, no, you still have to call your on call, and the nurse would actually get that call, and then the nurse would direct the DSP to say, yes, go ahead and call Station MD. So you took what might be an hour and a half call at 2 a.m. that led to a 3-minute call at 2 a.m. for your nurses who are on call. The other way another state did it is they gave autonomy to DSPs and said, for these reasons, you have the autonomy to call Station MD independently without calling the on-call nurse. And then all of these reasons, you still have to use the internal on-call nurse, and then they will make a decision. So it's really whatever is best for you all as a provider and meets your needs. But we can definitely have some conversations about that. And while I'm talking about it, Tennessee, which is the state that I was predominantly in for my 23 years, we went through HCBS settings rules in 2015 because we had a class action lawsuit. So it was mandated by a judge that we rolled out HCBS. So I can help if anybody is interested in how to weave HCBS into your Station MD and telehealth needs. So I'm just throwing that out there if anybody's interested in that. Next slide, please. So we're at questions. I thought that was it. So do we the one thing I did want to share too, I'd made a note that I didn't share in the slide deck. Currently, the district's treat in place rate is 90.8%. So out of all the calls that we got, the 200 and some odd calls that we've gotten since January, we're actually able to treat in place 90.8% of those calls. Our national average of treat in place, and we're currently in 28 states, is 93.6%. So just some things to think about. The other thing that I wanted to share, and I think Mr. Jose has a much deeper dive into some of this conversation, but from the time of the contract rolled out until May, because that's when the report went out, we actually were able to save the district a little less than $750,000 of avoidance cost, right? And what we're hoping for is with the help of you all as providers and us giving, any kind of training and support that you all need, if we can get utilization to 10%, just 10% in the district, right? It would actually equate to a cost avoidance of almost $3 million for the same time span. So we just wanted to share some of that information with you. I wanted to introduce myself and let you know that, like I said, I'm the main point of contact for the district. And in the comments, I'll put my email address and my phone number so anyone can reach out that is interested. Ms. Shasta, do you have any questions or anything else that you would like for me to talk about?
No, there are a few questions here. Let's see, they're in the chat. All right. Can Station D physicians provide initial assessments for new admissions in the event the person's PCP and/or RN is unavailable?
Great question. Yes, the answer is yes to that. And even more so, let's say you're going to get a new person in your provider agency, then it's so hard to find a community PCP. So we can act in the capacity of that PCP until you can find your community PCP. So yes, we can definitely do that. We don't do annuals. So I will tell you that we will do them in an emergency situation, but we're not, we don't have the bandwidth to do everyone's annual physicals. So, but we can definitely do them for the purpose of new residents and their need for, extension of their meds past that 30 days that they may have came with.
Okay, thank you. And we will continue, as you stated, having that collaboration with our health and wellness, just to be sure that providers continue to use their primary care physician and they're not substituting Station MD in place of their primary care physician. The next is, what is the contact number for Station MD?
Yes, so to just make sure I clarify that, the station, if you want to use Station MD as for an assessment, is on that slide deck, but I'll also provide it. And then I'll provide my number, which I would be the main contact for Station MD outside of needing an assessment.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The next question is, can folks who live in a natural home use Station MD? And I'll answer that question. Because Station MD is also tied to residential providers, if a person is actually authorized for high acuity in-home support, then we do have some people, some providers and families who have opted to have Station MD, the equipment, in their homes. So it's not available to just everyone in their natural home, but specific to that in-home high acuity service that's tied to the nursing support that's provided for people who reside in their natural home.
And one of the things you said, Ms. Shasta, made me think of one other thing. So absolutely, we don't want to take the place of the PCP. But some things to think about when wrapping us around with that PCP support. Let's say that someone wakes up today in what appears to be a pink eye, and you call your doctor, but your doctor can't get you in for 3 days to assess that situation. You could use Station MD at that point to address the situation now. And let's say that we did determine that it is pink eye, and we went ahead and wrote, the script for the antibiotics. You could still follow up with your PCP 3 days later to make sure that everything's, progressing well and the doctor feels good about that. The thing that can help with that is if you have to wait 3 to 4 days to see your PCP, if you have pink eye, then everybody in the whole house has pink eye by the time if you have to wait for some stuff like that. Or in a rare occasion that the person is just adamant that they're not going to the doctor today, but they really need to be seen, and that that you're going to be an antecedent to a much bigger behavior, then use Station MD for that moment to get the person what they need in the moment, and then follow up with your PCP.
Yes, and I think we are all in agreement with that. It's just that you also indicated during your presentation that you're seeing a high number of calls during the middle of the day, when the concern for us would be, did they reach out to their PCP prior to contacting Station MD, and their PCP said, hey, we're not going to be able to see you in this amount of time, as opposed to reaching out first to Station MD. So we just want to be sure that, in your presentation, you spoke about in most states, you see it's evening hours, weekends, but you're seeing the utilization is during the day, during the district, in the district, when our expectation would be that that's when you're mostly reaching out to your primary care physicians first.
Perfect.
Okay. Can day providers use Station MD? Not at this time. It's only authorized for people who are in residential settings and or receiving high acuity in-home support. And okay, that was the same question.
Okay. And I apologize. That's me still trying to learn exactly how the district uses us. So I apologize for any confusion about that.
Oh, no problem. Okay, and I think there was one more question about behaviors, but that goes back to being sure that people are using their primary care physician. For behavioral challenges, would you work with the behavior support clinician who developed the person's BSP?
Yes, for intermittent needs, like we wouldn't personally partner with them on a long-term basis where we would be part of that plan. We would be there for any kind of, crisis situation. Does that make sense? Did I answer that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, and I think that's it.
Well, perfect. And as I said, I'm willing to physically come there. I just did a stint in Ohio with some folks where I physically went to their residence, and they had me train their DSPs. And we did it at shift change, trying to be mindful of overtime. So if, however you all think you might be able to use what I can offer to help train and just help acclimate your folks to Station B, I'm more than welcome to do that.
Thank you. And there was one more question about a provider that's offering in-home support, and can it be used? It can only be used if the person who is receiving in-home support high acuity at this point in time, and the person in the family supported will have to be in agreement with that equipment being in their home and have access to the internet. Okay. Well, thank you. So we have our next presentation from Jose. Jose, I'm going to unmute you and give you presenter's rights. All right. You have access to present.
All right. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
And of course, I'm going to start from the beginning. And I'm going to need to move this out of the way. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jose Castruelo. I'm the supervisor of the Quality Improvement Unit at QUAPMA. And the goals for today will be to talk a little bit about the utilization of Station MD since the beginning and in comparison with the incident reports that we review every morning during IRC and how compare and how much we will be reduced based on the telehealth performance goals that we want. Let's talk about the goals, the telehealth performance goals that we have to, in terms of DDS, see is the reduce of the total emergency room visits by 40%. Now, we still don't know if the 40% can be in 2-3 years. We still don't know if that will be soon enough, but that is the goal, and that's what I'm going to keep tracking every year to see if we see a reduction in those two. And of course, the total number of unplanned inpatient hospitalizations, not only based on the calls that we that the providers make to the Station MD or the telehealth provider, but the number of incident reports that are entered into our reporting system, MCIS. Now, in here, what I have is just, let's start by the number of before and after telehealth, the number of incidents that were reported under the types of emergency room urgent care visits and the unplanned emergency hospitalizations. We also include some of the COVIDs, but you can see here the COVIDs were not that much of a number that will see a reduction. So, and I'm comparing in here, you will see 4 different time periods, this is not calendar years, this is not fiscal years, this is from April when we really start using Station MD to all the way to the end of June. But in these 4 periods, and I'm going to jump into the next slide, I'm just going to compare before and after COVID, how that, if there's a reduction or not. We don't want to use, let me just show back here these periods in which COVID were at the peak. And so we're going to just eliminate that novelty to see if we can see a reduction. And of course, I'm going to keep doing this every year to see if we really, with the help of Station MD or telehealth, have been seeing a reduction in the emergency room urgent care visits. And yes, we can see that in ER since April 19th, March 20, we see a reduction of 14% in terms of the emergency room and urgent care visits. However, we see an increase by 48%, almost half in terms of the planned emergency inpatient hospitalizations. Of course, telehealth could send everybody to the emergency room, and in the emergency room, the person can be hospitalized in the inpatient settings. So that will change. But both numbers, both of those categories, what we would like to see is a reduction. And in these numbers also, we will excluding all the setting types that is not likely won't have access to telehealth. So that's a number that we have to consider, and I will consider those, excluding those sites, and they are listed below here in the footnote. which ones are not going to be considered on that in this calculation. By the way, this slide has been updated, so you might have, there's a couple things that have been updated effective this morning, so we're going to send this again for your convenience later today. But you can see also, this is a facility type, supposed to put setting types, we call it setting type. Setting here, we see the average of the changes between the setting types. Support living has the biggest number of incident reported, and they were reduced by 9%. Intermediate care facilities, those are the biggest reported, and you can see also the Department of Behavioral Health Support Living, a reduction of maybe half, which is a good thing. The natural home support living, some natural homes support living that provide accurate services, the Chasta was explaining, some of them has access to telehealth. So there was an increase, but compared to this number, the increase would not wear too much of the weight of the change. And this one is the other incident types, which is unplanned emergency inpatient hospitalizations, is where we see an increase. All right, just in this one, we see an increase of 300, like 3 times the number of the 3 from this time period. But you can see from the biggest reporters, which is the support living and intermediate care facility, we see an increase of 78% and 23%. Residential habilitations too. Again, remember that is some of the settings have been removed from the equation. All right, now let's compare the utilization of telehealth with incident reports and the reports calls. We receive every month, I receive every month a report from Station MD from every call that the providers make. And our work is to compare if two things, if those incidents that have been referred to the emergency room have been tracked, and if they're following with the recommendations. Okay. Just for all you know, I'm listing here all the sites, all the settings. Is 361 settings that has access to telehealth and all the providers' names. There is a couple of settings that I know from last year, they probably closed, but they have reported some incident reports in those settings. So I'm gonna leave those 2 settings in the equation in there. But this is the number of provider that has access to telehealth and the number of settings for each providers. You can see the first 2 had the biggest number of settings. Now, in these 2 charts, now I'm comparing since the beginning of the use of telehealth. This is 15 months in here. And of course, in the second chart, I decided to add in this the March, because the last 2 weeks of March, there were some providers. This was before it was sent, the information was sent to everybody. There was 9 calls that were made, and one was transferred to the emergency, but that's the one we want to track. So I decided to put it in there. But as you can see, since the beginning, what we would like to see eventually is a reduce of this chart in here in the top, which is the emergency room and urgent care visits, in the unplanned emergency inpatient hospitalizations, and we would like to see an increase in these charts. We call there is an average of 34. I average all this per month. It's an average of 34 calls here per month that people do to Station D, and out of those, the average is like 3 of those calls were referred to the ER. Okay, so it has not been a change that much. The average of ERs are 72 incidents, and the average is of the EIH is like 25%, 25. calls, 25 incident reports that were reported. So we don't see too much of an decrease in here, but we like to see an increase in the number of calls that we make, because we also know that probably this will be a reduction. And one thing that we, for example, every morning when we discuss each incident, sometimes we notice that, for example, 2 weeks ago, one person went to the emergency room and that person was not seen for 3 hours. That person decided to go home, and I checked the CRIS report, the CRIS system, what happened with that person. And yeah, he decided to walk out because his name was never called. So not necessarily because people goes to the ER, they are receiving the treatment they they wanted to get. But we think that if that person would be called station, they will be a different care that he probably will receive. So that's something to remember. Now in here, I have a screenshot at the top of the incident form that we had to do. The providers, when they are reporting each incident, they had to select. And there was something that we wanted tell everybody to be sure that this is checked when they call station MD, and if the station MD send the person to the hospital, check like yes. And this is the comparison of those in the bottom, because a lot of people and I had to say a lot of incident reports just check yes, and they also say check yes for them that the station MD refer them to the hospital when they have not. And I have 2 reports, the incident reports and the station the reports. And I will talk about the cross-reference I did on this. So you can see a total incidents reported by selecting certain types were 1531, total incident with access to telehealth. In other words, all the settings that has access to telehealth and reported all those incidents were 1,147. And total incident reported with access to telehealth equipment that responding yes in here was 66. They said they utilize the station MD in both of this, and unplanned emergency patient hospitalizations was 85 total. Total incident reported with access to telehealth equipment that responded yes to the station indeed in urgent care. So it was 69. Now in here, you see what it says? Yes, they referred them to the urgent care. It says it was 69. Now there is a difference there between the people that are really said that station and they really refer them to the emergency room versus what station and is reporting to us in their monthly reports. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that later. And the last one is total incidents reported with a no here, and this with no access to telehealth, but reporting the station MD was contacted. So there is some people that do not have access, and probably they're in a rush to complete these incident reports, and they just decided to check this, which is inflated the numbers of the incident reports in the utilization review. So we had to always compare that. And I cannot stress more to other providers to let the staff know and the reporters of this to be careful to when they check this, because it's a difference. And then we had to focus on what happened. They really went sent to the hospital or not by station MD. All right. Now this is summary of the calls since the beginning of station MD. I said since March 22 to the end of June, there were 558 calls that were placed to station MD. Out of those 53, this is a station MD numbers, 53, and I'm going to go back to this slide, not 69, it says 53 were referred to the ER. 9%. Almost 10%. Out of those 53 calls referred to the ER, and that's something that is new in this slide. 70% calls were not reported as an incident. So if I go over the list of all the 53, I went into the MCIS and I found out there was no incident entered for that call or for that referral to the ER. So again, we might need to pay more attention and be sure that anytime we contact station D, they are referred to the hospital. That is an incident that needs to be entered. All right. And out of the 61 telehealth providers, they were listed in here, right? Oops. 40 has on 40 the ones that have utilized Station MD. So there is a lot of providers. We're talking about 20 something providers that have never used Station MD. And out of those 21 providers, those are the incidents that they have been reported as going to the ER and EIH, inpatient hospitalizations. We probably want to have to set some meetings with those providers and find out why they are not using Station MD. They need more training, access, what would be the problematics. So that's something that we will be doing in coordination with some of the leaders to our agency here. Okay, so that is the end of my presentation. That's my number. If you have any questions, please let me know. Do you have any questions about this?
Thank you, Jose. I am reviewing the chat to see if there are any questions, but it was important for us to specifically present this information because, as Jose has indicated, we have several incident reports that are entered for emergency room visits and inpatient hospitalization, and there's no evidence that Station MD has been contacted prior. And as much as we do appreciate the fact that there have been 558 calls that have been made to Station MD, which have ultimately may result in an increase in emergency room visits because some of those calls may have just gone to the emergency room as opposed to contacting Station MD. So we can see that there's a decrease, but we really need providers to look at their process and also include contacting Station MD before going into, sending someone to the emergency room or urgent care. There's always going to be those cases where it's not applicable. Someone's unconscious. No, you're not going to call Station MD before you take them to the emergency room, or recommend that call 911, not even take them to the emergency room, but call 911. So it's very important that when we have these meetings with the providers that have not been utilizing Station MD at all, and it will be one meeting just to have a discussion about how we can work together to improve staff's comfortability of actually using Station MD. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat right now, so thank you, Jose. We have 10 minutes left, and I have a few updates that I want to present. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen.
And I need to stop here, right? I guess.
Yes. Okay, so next slide. Well, I'm saying next slide when I'm the presenter. Okay, so everyone should have received the transmittal specific to the personal protective equipment reimbursement, the documentation if providers were going to be submitting information and receipts specifically to be reimbursed for personal protective equipment that was purchased. That documentation was due by July 24th. The documentation that was required was the provider census. We needed to know the name of the person that received the personal protective equipment, as well as the service that they were that they were providing, that you were providing specifically if it's day or residential services. And then you needed to be providing that service to that person as of September 30th, 2023. I mean, sorry, September 30th, 2021 and September 30th, 2022, because you are providing information for two separate submissions. That's why we needed the information for people that you were supporting in fiscal year 21 and people that you were supporting in fiscal year 22. We also need the provider invoices. That was the itemized list of the PPEs that were purchased with the corresponding receipts and the invoice from the company. They needed to be separated. As you know, most of the providers submitted their PPE reimbursement information for the first year of the public health emergency. So that first submission was from March 10th, 2020 to March 11th, 2020 to March 10th, 2021. We recognize that we need to start having these submissions based off of fiscal year. That first submission crossed 2 fiscal years, and that can be an issue for accounting. So in order for us to catch up and make sure that the submissions are processed based off of fiscal year, this next submission was from March 11th, 2021 to September 30th, 2021. And then the second submission would be from fiscal year 22, which is October 1, 2021 to September 30th, 2022. And when we end this fiscal year of 23, I will also be asking for the same information to cover fiscal year 2023. So you also had to submit the receipts for any PPEs that were purchased, and you needed to highlight that PPEs that were purchased, because sometimes people, of course, will go shopping and they'll have more than PPEs on that invoice or the receipt, and then you will need to total out the specific cost for the PPE items. And that's the same for invoices that may have been purchased online. So if you use Amazon or some type of online service, we need you to highlight the PPE item. We need you to include the cost, and we need to be sure that there's proof of payment. During the last submission, we noticed that providers would submit invoices, but there was no evidence that there was proof of payments. Copies of receipts and invoices were included in the transmittal. So all of that information was due on July 24th, the QRS, and you were supposed to submit that information to the QRS. Hopefully, most of you providers have submitted that information. I will be following up with the QRS so that we can get an inventory of all of the providers who submitted the information. Unfortunately, because I'm sharing, I can't see what's in the chat if you're asking questions. So if you do have some questions, I will review them as soon as I finish presenting.
I'm sorry, Shasta, I don't see you were sharing.
Hello?
Hi, Shasta, I don't think you were sharing your slides. I'm probably the only one who was able to unmute myself. So
Sharing. Right, it's hello, is it sharing now? Can't see what's in the chat. Okay, thank you, Charlotte. All right, I just saw the yes pop up. Okay. All right, I will go back to the slide specific to the protective equipment reimbursement. Can everyone see that slide? Okay. All right. So as I indicated, these are the documents that were required for the providers to submit by July 24th to their assigned QRS. Even though you weren't able to see the slides, you were able to hear everything that was discussed. So these are the documents that were required for submission. Next, we've had a lot of conversations specific to documentation concerns, and I'm not going to go through the whole list, but the Department of Program Integrity, as well as our performance management, DHCF, have identified that the common factor has to be it's documentation. That seems to be the common factor when we find that there are a lot of things that are non-compliant, as well as PCR. So up on the slide, there are a list of things that are currently out of compliance that we need to address when it comes to reviews that are being conducted internally and externally of records pertaining to the provider community. And it's the lack of documentation, discrepancies in the documentation sources, discrepancy between units authorized and billed units, duplicate progress notes appear to be from another date, and service and or DSP progress notes does not contain information per the regulations, and more units billed than hours of services delivered. So for us to work collaboratively, we are working with DHCF so we can develop some technical assistance guides that we're able to provide to the provider community. And by collaboratively, when I say we, is DHCF, DDS, and we will also be engaging the provider community. But right now, in order for us to understand where some of those barriers are when it comes to training people supported, we are asking that you provide us with this specific documentation, your training curriculums on the IDD and IFS home and community-based waiver. And by your training curriculum, I'm speaking specifically to the provider community's training curriculum. We know you have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, that's mandatory, but outside of those trainings, what additional trainings are you providing to your staff to ensure that they understand, one, the home and community-based waiver rules, that they understand the documentation requirements for that particular service. So for example, if we go into a home or even a day program, and a DSP is actually providing employment readiness, do they understand what that employment readiness service is? And do they understand what the documentation requirements are for that specific service? Not that they're just a DSP, but they're a DSP who's providing employment readiness. And how does that relate to the services and supports that the person they're supposed to be they're supporting receive? And it's the same for supported living. If someone is providing supported living, do they understand that that's the service that they're providing at that time? We've heard previously when Ali and Mary were presenting questions about, well, can a person provide more than one service? Can an employee? Yes, they can, but they need to know the difference in that service that they're providing. So if they're providing companion in the morning, do they understand the companion rules for that service? And if they're providing in-home support in the evening, do they understand that they're providing in-home support and they understand the waiver rules and the documentation requirements specifically for that service? We're also requesting a copy of your quality assurance policy and procedures, a copy of your blank quality review tool, the tool that you have in place to monitor how the quality assurance plan that you have in place, as well as your last 2 quality reviews and findings. Those things will need to be uploaded to MCIS under the Provider tab, under Provider Documents, under Documents. And you will also need to send an email confirmation to your assigned QRS by August 25th, 2023. And the next thing, I wanted to get feedback on the provider fair. I thought it was a great event. We had a large turnout, and I just wanted to get some feedback on the provider fair. And then if there are any questions. So I'm going to stop sharing so I have an opportunity to see the chat as opposed to questions just popping up. I can't see them that way when I'm hosting. Okay. Okay, so when will the documents be due? If you're referring specifically to the next to last slide, when I was requesting the documentation for training as well as quality assurance, those documents are due by August 25th, 2023. Please, can you refresh us on the policies? I'm going to recommend that you review those policies and procedures and the specific Medicaid waiver rules. Ali's slideshow provided the link to those home and community-based waiver rules. It's more important that you actually look at that information and review it. If you have questions, that's great. But I think it's important for you as a provider to review that information. And then if you have questions, your QRS is always available to assist you. Are there any other questions? Where do we find the pictures that were taken at the provider fair? I will actually follow up with Jocelyn. There may be some pictures that are on our website. So I'll follow up with Jocelyn Harris to see if those pictures are posted on our website. Okay, is there any feedback on the provider fair? Positives, areas for improvement? I know we're beyond time, but I didn't want to miss that opportunity. Thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. So thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.